You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your healthcare? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their healthcare. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your healthcare, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your healthcare while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
A little tired, a little tore up, still hurting from the fight. And then it hit me. You ain't gotta pick a side. You can love your fellow man.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am Rick Robinson. I am the programming director at KLRNradio.com, also vice president of operations for KLRN Radio Inc. This is a special presentation brought to you by the Federalist Coalition as well as KLRN Radio. We have a special guest, Mr. Kenneth Ivory, who will be joining us tonight to talk about federalism, what it means to him, and we actually have some other things we'll be going into as well. Good evening, Ken. Give me just a moment. All right, your mic is now open, sir. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great.
You are more than welcome. All right, so as everybody knows, this is a special presentation. We actually cleared the schedule for the night to make sure we had the ability to do this because, well, to me, federalism is kind of a big deal. So what I want to do before we get things started, I want to give you a few minutes to kind of give folks some background, what it is that you do, how you came to be kind of a cheerleader for federalism, etc. So why don't you, if you don't mind, go ahead and give some folks a few minutes of background.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. You're right. Federalism is a big deal, and all too often we don't really understand the genius of the system that we've been given. I was a chairman of the Chamber of Commerce and president of the Rotary Club, and had my law practice, and I kept looking at the debts and the deficits just skyrocketing, and federal criminalization increasing, and the cost of federal regulations increasing under administrations from both parties. And as president of the Chamber of Commerce, I got to moderate debates for the elections for members of Congress in the U.S. Senate from Utah, and I would ask them questions. Where is this going? I have 4 children, and at the time the national debt back in the good old days was 5 trillion, 6 trillion, 7 trillion. But increasing at an alarming rate, and I would ask them, what's the plan? When do we stop this? How does this work? And how do we stop this centralization that I view as an assault on the future of my children? And I was very alarmed by that, and it became very apparent that in Washington, quite frankly, the system is just dysfunctional. It's ground down to such an extent that it really is largely unworkable, because it wasn't ever intended for those at the national level to check and control and curb themselves. But it became apparent that we need an effective check at the state level. And as I studied and looked more and more, it was very apparent that this was the job. And I had a good friend that probably after 8 years of serving in the state legislature, I still call him a good friend, but he said, you need to do this. You need to step up, and you need to carry this torch. We need to build firewalls at the state level. And, it became kind of a God thing at that point. I prayed and with my family and thought, what do we do? And how do we do this? And it was very clear that we need to step up. We can't just complain and point fingers. And so in 2010, I ran for office. I was elected to the Utah state legislature, and I kind of assumed that everyone understood these constitutional principles and that everyone was on board. And quite frankly, Rick, what I learned was there's nothing about winning an election that gives you the understanding of the very inspired fundamentals of our system, our structure. There's a statement that I love. W. Edwards Deming. I used to work for the mayor of the city of Osaka in Japan. I was in the international relations department with the city of Osaka years ago, and they have monuments to this gentleman, W. Edwards Deming, the just-in-time inventory and total quality management guru. And he makes a statement, Rick, that he says every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results that it gets. You think about it, every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results that it gets. Well, the results that we're getting right now is now we're $21.5 trillion in debt, something north of $100 trillion in unfunded obligations. We continue to have more and more of the things that concern our lives, liberties, and properties decided thousands of miles away by people we don't elect, we can't unelect if they're even members of Congress, and certainly by bureaucrats that we don't have any control over. And our system was not designed that way. Our system, Rick, was designed to empower our individual governing voice. Our system was designed to give us individually leverage over the efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability of government. And that balance is simply gone. And so that's where federalism comes in. I mean, it comes into this point of our system was designed to magnify, to amplify our governing voice if it's properly balanced. But right now we have a system that's just woefully out of balance. And that's kind of been what we've been working on from the state legislature standpoint. I created the Federalism Commission in Utah. I chair the Federalism Commission. We're working with legislators and organizations around the nation, with universities and think tanks and groups like the Federalist Coalition and others to talk about system. And if you'd like, just as an intro, I'll give you a kind of the framework that we go on. 2 years ago, it was August of 2016, height of the presidential election, right? I mean, the Trump, Clinton, the debates and the acrimony and all the fur that was flying. And it was our 28th anniversary. And my wife, bless her heart, I convinced her that we should go to Pagosa Springs, Colorado to celebrate our 28th anniversary, because that's the home of a place that builds these geodesic dome greenhouses that I really like and want to get. And my wife, to humor me, we went to Pagosa Springs, Colorado and looked at the greenhouses, but fortunately there is a hot spring resort. So after looking at the greenhouses, we went in to have massages. And so we were getting a massage, and I'm in the room, and there's a transplant from New York who is the masseuse, and he's got a ponytail down the back and Birkenstocks, and he has a mountain bike in the massage room. And as I'm there and we're getting acquainted, and what do you do? And I tell him I'm in the state legislature, and he asks a pretty simple question. He says, so what do you work on in the legislature? And I think to myself, Rick, if I say federalism, it's probably going to go just right over his head. And so I said, let me see if I can explain it this way. Look at your mountain bike sitting there. What's written on the side of the tires of your mountain bike? And he says, well, the tire pressure. I said, right. So do you have any idea more or less what the tire pressure of your mountain bike is supposed to be? He says, yeah, it's about 55 pounds per square inch of pressures. Great. What would your bike be like if you had 105 pounds of pressure in your front tire and less than 5 pounds of pressure in the back tire? He said, oh my gosh, that'd be a disaster. I said, well, disaster. I said, what if you just rode the bike harder? Maybe that would work. Oh no, that would make it even worse. If I ride the bike in that condition, if I try to ride it harder, it would be a disaster. So, well, what if you got a different rider? What if you got like Lance Armstrong all hopped up on steroids? Maybe that would solve your problem. It's like, no, that would make it worse. I said, I've got the solution to your problem. What if you just steered your bike when you go out, you steer it more to the left, or you steer it more to the right? Like, no, that doesn't solve the problem. I said, well, you see, this is what I'm working on, because in 2016, in the height of this presidential election, all we're talking about is should Trump or Clinton ride that bike? And should the bike go to the right or should it go to the left? And what I'm working on is restoring balance and fixing the bike, restoring balance in the tires. You see, in our government, there's one sphere of government at the national level that was to have few and defined powers, and another sphere of government at the state level that was to have numerous and indefinite powers. And today, the front tire is bloated and about to explode, and the back tire is so flat it's about to chew the rubber off the rim. And all we talk about is who should ride the bike. and should the bike go to the right or the left? It's time to fix the bike. And Ricky got so excited. He stopped the massage. He got so excited. He said, I've learned more about government in the last 5 minutes than I've known all my life. We have to tell everybody in America this story because we have to fix the bike. And Rick, indeed, we have to fix the bike. And that's the mission that we're on.
I think that is honestly one of the best analogies I've ever heard, so I applaud you for that. Now, one of the first questions that I have for you, and then we'll kind of start working on opening up the lines and see if we have any questions from the chat, things like that. And you may have already answered it with your analogy, but I just want to, in case anybody's tuning in and you're just finding out what's going on, no, this is not the Conservative Curmudgeon Radio Show. He'll be back next week. I am Rick Robinson. I'm the programming director here at KLRNradio.com. I am joined by Ken Ivory, who is actually a pretty staunch supporter of federalism. We have begun talking about federalism. So my first question, for those that may not really even understand what we're talking about, what does federalism mean to you exactly? Since it seems like there are multiple definitions for what we call federalism.
Well, yes, I can boil it down to three simple words. Federalism means limits on governing power, divisions of governing power that come from the people, and balance in the governing powers that the people delegate to the national government on one hand and the state government on the other hand. And they created this system of limits, divisions, and balance to curb and check the governing power to secure our inalienable rights. That's the whole purpose of government, to secure our rights, not to give us stuff, not to do exciting, novel things. The purpose of government in our compact in America is to divide and limit and balance government so that it controls each other in order to secure our rights to pursue happiness according to our vision and our dreams and our unique expressions of pursuing happiness with our life, our liberty, and our property. Federalism is essential to that. It is the structural protection of our liberty.
Well, and there's a reason that I wanted to ask you that, because in becoming more and more involved in both federalism, the Federalist Party, the Federalist Coalition, when I start talking to people outside of broadcasting and outside of, the folks that digest news on a regular basis, when I start talking to them about federalism, it seems like it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. We have this idea of the federal government being this overreaching behemoth, and I think that's part of the reason why when we first start talking to people about this idea of federalism, that's one of the first things that I get a visceral reaction about. So are you saying that the government needs to be bigger? Why would you call yourselves Federalists? I'm like, that's not what any of this is about. It's kind of like the idea, and this is the analogy that I use, when we talk to people about liberalism versus progressivism. Liberalism doesn't mean what we say it is today. In many ways, a lot of what we're talking about right now would have been a very liberal idea when the word liberalism started being used. So I think, unfortunately, what's happening is our lexicon is changing. So things that used to have a positive meaning are now having negative connotations. And that's one of the things that I find myself having to work through every single time I start trying to have an open conversation about federalism. So that's one reason why, since we have some people that have probably never heard this concept before, I wanted to open things up by having them hear what federalism meant to you. We do have a couple of callers on the line, so if it's all right with you, I'll see if they have any questions for you.
Sure, that'd be fine.
All right, so we're going to start with Becky out of Texas. Becky, your mic is actually, hang on, making sure I'm hitting the right button here. All right, so Becky, your mic is now live. You're on with Ken and myself. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. So I'm assuming that you called in because you have questions, or were you just listening?
A little bit of both. I understand the principles of federalism, but can we actually consider America, as it currently operates, a federalist republic? Are we still operating under the principles of federalism at this time?
That's a very good question.
It's a great question, Becky. It's struggling. No doubt about it. It's struggling. The idea of federalism is that you divide power, that you have a group of independent actors, in this case independent states, consolidated for some limited purposes. Kind of like, imagine you have a bunch of doctors that own medical buildings, and they decide they all want to get together and hire one property manager because it's really efficient instead of having 13 property managers. And so they hire one property manager that deals with, mowing the lawn and the receptionist and the building and the roofing and the HVAC and all of that. But the property manager doesn't engage with the patients, and the property manager doesn't prescribe medications. The property manager deals with these limited collective things that it's more efficient to do together. Very simple. I mean, that's what federalism is all about. Now, we still have a form of that, right? Of course we did. I mean, that's the name of our government. But we're losing the balance, right? It was intended to be a very, very definite balanced situation. And now I got to tell you, Becky, I mean, I've dealt with state legislators and leaders all over the nation. And if you ask them the very simple question, where is the line? Where is the division of governing power? They really don't know. Let me share with you something. I love this quote. I love this quote, but this will give you an idea of how far we've come. See if you can guess which very prominent U.S. president made this statement. He said he made it just before he was elected president, as he was running for president. He says, "I've been asked to talk about the respective powers of the national and state governments to rule and regulate, where one begins and the other ends." In other words, where's the line, right? "As a matter of fact and law, the governing rights of the states are all those which have not been surrendered to the national government by the Constitution or its amendments. Congress has been given the right to legislate on particular subjects, but this is not the case in the matter of a great number of other vital problems of government, such as," and then he goes on to list, "the conduct of public utilities, of banks, of insurance, of business, of agriculture, of education, of social welfare, and of a dozen other important features. In these, Washington must not be encouraged to interfere." Becky, could you hazard a guess as to which aspiring soon-to-be U.S. president made that statement?
I'm willing to guess, based on history of hearing other things, that it was probably Obama.
Yeah, you're going the right direction. It was actually FDR. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as governor, and he went on to say, "Thus it was clear to the framers of our Constitution that the greatest possible liberty of self-government must be given to each state." And so we understood that, for 150 years, we became the most productive, powerful, economically prosperous nation in the world. And the federal government operated on just 3% of GDP for 150 years. And of course, now we're 26% of GDP and $1 trillion a year in new debt, and another 5 to 6 trillion a year in accrued obligations debt. And so that balance is really skewed. And that's really the idea of federalism. Now critically, we like to point fingers and say, oh, the federal government is doing this. Now, federal is actually a misnomer. The federal government is the name of our entire system of government. The founders were very clear. It was the national government and the state governments, because federal described the whole system of government. But we like to point our fingers and say that government in Washington is out of control. Well, that's what governments do that aren't effectively checked. It's like releasing a gas in an open space. It's going to fill whatever space it's contained in. And if the states aren't actively containing that national governing power, it's going to fill the vacuum. And that's where we are today. So we have a lot of work to do, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I would definitely say we have a lot of work to do. Hey, Gwen, I just noticed you're on the line as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
Did you call Gwen?
Yeah, Gwen?
Yes. Well, I would I live in Illinois, so we have a lot of problems at the state level also. But I would be curious as to, is this savable? If so, what do we need to do to try to rein back the national government?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. Yes, of course it is savable, because the sovereign in this system is us. It's our government, the people. And so it really is up to us, but we have to act, right? We have to know what the responsibility, what the job description is of these agents that we hire, that we elect. We call them representatives. And so imagine if you have a business, right? I mean, when I was, I grew up from 8 years old washing, drying, folding towels in a family car wash business. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I had done everything in the car wash. I was welding and run the gas pumps and the cash register and everything. And so by the time I'm in my early 20s, I was put in charge to be the manager of the car wash. And my father had some people working for him, some really old people, right? They were like 40 and 50. Back when I was 20, that really sounded like something. Now that I'm a grandfather, I'm looking back at that. But I could kind of tell they weren't really managing his finances well, and something was wrong. And I kept trying to look into it, but I didn't know enough about how to be the boss. And so I was trying to figure it out, but I didn't really know. Well, they went around me and went straight to my father and said, hey, this young whippersnapper you have here, he's going to ruin your business. And they got his ear and convinced him that I was destroying the business. And my own father fired me from being the manager of the car wash because I didn't know how to act like the boss. And so I wasn't treated like the boss. Now, sadly, and this was kind of a repeating thing, come to find out these people were ripping off my father, and my intuition was right, but I didn't know how to act like the boss, and so I wasn't treated like the boss. Well, in our system, the government derives its power from the consent of the governed. Unique in all the world at that time. I mean, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The people are the sovereign, but if we don't know how to act like the boss, we won't be treated like the boss. So we need to know what this system of federalism is. We need to know what the responsibilities are of our agent, and we need to hold them accountable. Now, really super simple, Gwen, because if you think about it, we need to know who our agents are. It's like I like to call it three things. I call it the three P's of sovereignty, the three P's of self-government. We need to be personal, we need to be professional, and we need to be persistent. So with our agents, if we don't know who our agent is, how do we know if they know what the system of government is? How do we know if they know what their responsibility is? So first of all, we have to know who they are. We have to be personal about it. When's the last time you've sent a birthday card or just a handwritten thank you note to your representative? When's the last time you've done something to build the relationship and expand your influence with this person that you hire to protect your life, liberty, and property, regardless of their party? We have a responsibility to educate, to train, and to hold accountable those people that we choose to be our agents in this system. Personal. We've got to be personally engaged. Do we know them? Do they know us? Have they been in our home? Have we been in their home? Professional. Right? We need to be professional in how we communicate with them, and that grows our influence. And the most important one is being persistent. I'll tell you a quick story about that. I had a constituent, Diane, and Diane was not very personal. She was not very professional, but by golly, she was persistent. And she had a workers' compensation matter that she had been injured in a work accident, and there were some really terrible situations. We eventually passed legislation to help the situation for her. But Diane would call me every week. And she was a little cantankerous, and I knew I'd see on her phone that she called, and I knew if I didn't have the answer to her question, I'd put it to voicemail. I'd call my legislative counsel and staff, and I'd find out the answer to the question, and I'd call her back, because I knew that next week I was going to get a call from Diane. And every week she would call, and I knew she was going to follow up, and she was persistent, and so I knew I had to be motivated to give an answer to her. Personal, professional, persistent. We have to act like the boss if we want to be treated like the boss in our system, but absolutely it's savable. It's completely within our control. We have to leverage our power. We have to leverage our voice, leverage our concern to people around us. Everyone has a friend, and two friends can make more. It really only takes 5 to 10 people actively engaged in a state legislative district to really make the difference. But oftentimes we think it's impossible, so we don't engage.
You know, I've heard that more often than not about the insurmountable feel that people have when they first start trying to see about making changes politically, even at the state or the local level, because they just feel like it's this insurmountable idea for them to be able to make changes. I think that's one of the things that we need to work on, and it's disappointing because, I mean, look, I'm a guy that spends 90% of my time talking about national politics, but I also occasionally fill in on a local station here. I have to say I enjoy the local shows much, much more because, one, national is easy. You pull up couple of sites, you can talk about 2 or 3 things for about an hour and you're usually done. State level stuff is so much more in depth, and so is the local stuff. And honestly, that's where real changes happen. So when we start talking about even this idea of federalism, it kind of needs to be a grassroots up kind of thing, because we've got to make sure that people understand that we are still technically supposed to be the bosses of these people that we yell and scream about all day in DC, because they seem to have forgotten that fact, and we need to find a way to remind them of that.
Well, see, and that's the very idea of federalism, right? It's leveraging your voice, leveraging your influence. Well, you have much greater influence the closer the issues are to you. You have much greater accountability, much greater effectiveness. And so you and I individually are not going to turn the ship of the national government with our little voice. But if we can leverage our little voice to our Rotary Club or our neighborhood group, and then with our neighborhood group, we leverage that into the representative we support or that we choose or that we replace, and we get our representative to be a champion to teach others within that state legislature. The state is intended by that system of federalism to be the effective check and counterbalance. That's how we leverage our voice. And it really doesn't take a lot of people. You get 5 to 10 people together and mobilized to support and educate and hold accountable a state representative, and get that state representative to leverage their voice and influence within a legislature, that one person can have a national reach. I'm just a dad, Rick. I mean, I'm a dad who saw these problems and said, my gosh, we have to teach. I can't bear the thought of leaving a 21 trillion now going to 100 trillion. They just estimated a couple weeks ago that by the 2040s, which is not that far off, 20 some years off, they estimate the national debt will be $99 trillion. I don't think it ever gets there. But if we don't step up to act, we will be responsible for what we leave behind. And this is the system. Federalism is the very nature of how we leverage our voice to curb and check what's happening so far away at the federal level, at the national level.
Yeah, and again, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that I've been trying to make people understand, because everything seems impossible when it's just you. But if you can find a way to get involved locally in a group or with people that you agree with, you can find ways to impact those changes. Hey, Ernest, I saw you come in a second ago. Did you have anything you want to add to the conversation? Any questions, anything?
Oh, yeah, how y'all doing? Yeah, I was still over here at the job, but I definitely wanted to make sure I jumped on for a second. I don't know what else y'all have actually gone over, but I've loved what I'm hearing so far, but especially when you're talking about on the local level, it really is important because it's all about grassroots, right? So if we're talking about federalism and how it actually works, if we have people, like I said, when we're trying to convince people, hey, look, if we're able to control things from the bottom up, if we're here in the state, we're supposed to be funding DC instead of the other way around, if we're able to cut those purse strings, we do have to start locally. And we have to stop thinking from the top down, because I'll be honest, a few years ago, that's how I thought about it. I thought about, okay, well, these guys up here at the top are running things, and it'll just trickle down to us. Well, I got a part of this group, the Federalist Coalition, and they pretty much explained how things were, about how federalism worked and how it's just so much more effective, and that's what the founders wanted. If we're talking about dual federalism, where the state and the feds stay in their own lane, and it even goes down to the local and state level, if everybody just does what they're supposed to do and stay in their lane, about how much more effective that would be for all of us municipally, through the state and federal, it's just about, again, convincing those who don't understand that, who just believe, okay, we have an entitlement system, it has a stranglehold on our economy, it has a stranglehold on what we do, period. It just seems so suffocating and so insurmountable sometimes. But you can chip away at that at the local level. But like you're saying, it's starting those little brush fires, I guess you could say. You want to be able to start those. If we're able to do that, okay, you have somebody in Utah, okay, we can start a chapter here. You have someone over in Colorado, we can start a chapter here. And I mean, just let it burn bright and just hammer away at it. That this is the way that it needs to be. This is the way that, show them how effective it is. So it's just about speaking to it and not quitting. I think that's the most important part. And I'm excited about that because actually it was like a light went off. When I'm like, oh, okay, so this is how it's supposed to be. So it's like, you ready to share it. How come you share it with people? It's like they look at you like a knot on a log. It's like they never heard of it before because they haven't. So, it's like that. So there it is. I don't know where the
no, that's exactly.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah, Ernest, I appreciate what you said, and you said something very critical, that to stay in their lane. My kids, when they were young, they played soccer, and the 5-year-olds playing soccer, it was just this little huddled mass following the ball, right? Everybody was on the ball. Everybody was following the ball. Well, that's what's happening in government today. Everything is drawn to Washington. Thomas Jefferson said, when everything is drawn to Washington in small things and great things, foreign and domestic, it will render powerless the checks of one government on another and become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was speaking in Des Moines. I speak on these subjects all over the nation, and I was in Des Moines speaking. It was in the winter. I was kind of sick, and I was tired, and I was excited to get home, and went to get the plane, and it was freezing cold rain in Iowa, and the flight was delayed, and I had to get a connecting flight in Minneapolis. I was really kind of worried I was going to miss my flight and be stuck in Minneapolis, and the plane finally took off, and I'm checking my watch and checking the time for the connecting flight. And as I went to get off the plane, there was this just enormous guy getting off the plane, and he had this big University of Utah football T-shirt on. And I thought, well, that guy's got to be going where I'm going, and so I thought I'll just try to follow him because the airport was crowded and everything. And so I got off the plane, I got behind him, and man, I had to run for all I was worth just to keep up with him. And he was carving a path through the airport. I'm dragging my bag and just following him and hoping he's going to the right place where I need to go. And turns out he's going to the same flight. We get there just as the door to the plane is about to close, and we get on the plane, and they sit us down right next to each other in the exit aisle. And, we kind of do the greeting chit chat. Who are you? And who are you? And he says, well, I'm the linebacker coach for the University of Utah football team. I said, wow, that's great. And I introduced myself. I'm Ken Ivory. I'm in the Utah State Legislature. And he says, well, what do you work on? I said, well, let me see if I can put it this way. BYU, Brigham Young University, and University of Utah, huge rivalry, right? They call it the Holy War, that with the football game that'll be coming up next month after next. And I said, imagine you're getting ready for the BYU U of U football game, and all week long the media is all hyped up, the players are hyped up, just a whole new level of energy, and people are all excited. It's a big rivalry, and the game gets closer, and you get all charged up. Your players are hyped up, and they come running out of the tunnel. They get out on the field. They start facing each other off, and stadium's just going wild. It's packed, and as they're down, they look and they get ready to go, and they look down on the field, and there are no lines on the field. And the football coach looked at me and said, oh, that'd be a disaster. I said, yeah, that's kind of what government's like today. There's no lines on the field. And so what I'm working on is restoring the lines on the field. So as you said, Ernest, so people stay in their lane and they know where this line of scrimmage is so that we can balance each other. And that's called federalism. And that's what I'm working on, is working on this system. He's like, oh my gosh, I get it. But it's critical, right? It's activity for activity's sake just doesn't help. Peter Drucker, management expert Peter Drucker said, sometimes we need to quit trying to do better that which we shouldn't be doing at all. And so often our national partner keeps trying to do better the things it shouldn't be doing at all. And we need to have a responsibility meeting and say, hey guys, let's look at the lanes we're supposed to be staying in, and you need to quit trying to do better that which you shouldn't be doing at all, and we need to hold you accountable for that. And that's really what we're talking about.
It's such a great analogy, though, because you don't know much about the town that I live in, but I live in a very small town, so high school football is pretty much all we have. So the analogy of the football field would click so well here because everybody understands it. It's a visual picture, and it gives you an idea of without having these markers and the basic way of you being able to navigate the field, how are you ever supposed to know what you're supposed to do? But I think that's one of the biggest things that we're looking at in this country, and I think the federal government, in a lot of ways, has done this on purpose through things like the federal government taking control of education. I'm a firm believer that education should never have been centralized to the federal government, because one of the biggest things that I saw once that started happening, we went from teaching civics to teaching social studies to teaching nothing. I mean, I actually am old enough I remember when we actually had civics classes, and then things started transitioning to what was called social studies. And now you're lucky if you even get that. We have an entire generation of people that don't even understand how our government is supposed to work, to the point where they're now lobbying to remove the Electoral College because they would rather us be a direct democracy than a representative republic, because they don't understand why the popular vote shouldn't matter nearly as much as the Electoral College vote.
There it is.
Because they just don't get it.
Yeah,
it's just terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting that even FDR, again, so now as president, in 1937, the 150th anniversary of the Constitution, FDR, President Roosevelt, headed a commission to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Constitution, and they produced a report which became a book called The Story of the Constitution. You can get it on eBay and Amazon and whatnot. Story of the Constitution. And in it, they had a form of teaching that we used to go through called a catechism. It was, a question and answer format. And in these questions that, again, FDR is the head of the commission on the Story of the Constitution, it says, where in the Constitution is there mention of education? Answer, there is none. Education is reserved exclusively to the states. And so with no later amendment to the Constitution in 1979, the federal government the national government just took it, it instituted the Department of Education. And now, hundreds of billions of dollars later, we're no better in educational output. And yet we've got another federal branch, federal department that is growing and taking up more of our earnings and taking more of our liberty from our earnings and savings, and that falls back on us, because, as you say, rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have. Rights we don't exercise and protect are no better than rights we don't have. And if we don't know the lines on the field, if we don't know the lanes we're supposed to stay in, it's the most natural thing in the world for government to expand to fill whatever space is not defended, and that's really where we are. So what we're talking about is hiring and training and holding accountable our state agents, our state representatives, to, number one, know the line, to know these lanes, and then to exert the power of a state, to leverage our individual voice into the power of a state, and then a union of states to be the counterbalance to a federal government that right now is exercising power in a vacuum, and it's just expanding to fill that space.
There's no checks. There's no rules, no parameters. And it just keeps getting eaten away. And you have people that, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is something, I just want to tie to what you're saying. They don't seem to understand, coming up in this system, that the federal government in the first place was supposed to be limited. Instead of, it was supposed to have, a finite amount of power. You were supposed to do A, B, C, and then everything else was supposed to be it's reverted back to the states. It's like the 10th Amendment does not exist. And that bothers me, because a lot of them, over generation after generation, this is the interpretation of the Constitution. Oh, well, it says we can do this. Well, this is implied and not expressed. I'm like, do you understand there's the letter of the law and then there's the spirit of it? It's like, okay, so how is this supposed to be instituted? So if they would only go by and we actually hold them accountable to the 10th Amendment, a lot of this stuff will be reverted, but it's going to be, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to be able to get it reversed, because it's been like that for so long. Oh, we can't do this. It's the defeatist attitude. We need to simply go back to the founding document. Yes, we can. It's like it says it right here. What are you talking about? So our elected officials are treated like prince and princesses. It's like we're supposed to be like serfs to them. That's not the way it works. I mean, really, they become celebrities. And for what? You're supposed to be conducting the people's business in the first place. That's all the way down to local. And I think that's the problem. So it's just, just about getting people more educated about what it is, what system we actually live in, Just like what he was just talking about as far as if you want to do a direct democracy, if you want to be old school Greece, and you want to have some really draconian laws, okay, go outside, litter, death. Okay, they noticed after a while, it didn't work after a while. Notice that draconian law didn't last that long in Greece. It's like, okay, everybody's dying. It's like you scared to do anything. That's not the way it's supposed to be, but we have a lot of that going on because the feds, that grip that the feds have right now, that they're being allowed to have right now, if we would just be able to stand up, enough of us, and understand, you know what, no, get behind me, say, no, you're supposed to be doing this. That's what needs to happen. So, I didn't mean to interrupt, but things like that
there's some
my blood pressure. So, yeah.
There's some really important things that come out of what you just said. So I want to be really clear about this. Federalism, this idea of the structure of our government, the name of our government, federalism, is not partisan. It's not left, it's not right, it's not liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat. It's about the structure. And so Justice Kennedy, recently retired Justice Kennedy in the NFIB versus Sebelius case, and he was joined with Scalia and Thomas and Alito, said it really well. I mean, the court's been saying this for a long time, but he said the structural protections, notably the restraints imposed by federalism and the separation of powers, tend to be undervalued or even forgotten by our citizens. He says, and the framers considered these structural protections of freedom the most important ones, for which reason they alone were embodied in the original Constitution and not left to later amendment. And then this has become kind of our theme statement, our motto, if you will, at the Utah Commission on Federalism that I chair. He said, the fragmentation of power, dividing and limiting, the fragmentation of power produced by the structure of our government is central to liberty. And when we destroy it, we place liberty at peril. James Madison said, look, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. Men weren't angels then, they're not angels now. We need government. And so what they did was they built a structure, a system, an unprecedented, inspired system to limit, divide, and check and balance governing power, because they knew then, which is true today, that it's the nature and disposition of men and government to amass unbridled power. So they built a system, but the system is not Republican. The system is not Democrat. It's like the bicycle that we're talking about. It's not where you ride the bike. It's not who rides the bike. It's fixing the bike. Make sure that the bike is operating optimally, that pressure, that manufactured specifications in the tire pressure is properly balanced. Well, then we've got a vehicle to take us to life, liberty, property, to pursue happiness. And that really is what the founders intended for us to do, is to focus on that structure, to choose representatives that will understand that structure, because that's what secures our rights. And we could talk a little bit more, Rick. In fact, before we close, when we get onto this, I want to talk to you a little bit about what state legislator training is like, and why we are where we are, and what we're doing at the Commission on Federalism and with Utah Valley University's Center for Constitutional Studies to kind of rectify some of this.
Yeah, we'll actually transition to that here in just a second. I do have a couple of more questions on deck. Becky, we're going to lead off with you. Gwen, you are on deck, so hang tight. Becky, I know you've got another question, so what's on your mind?
I understand the fact that we need to get active and take charge, but there's a greater risk that I think we're facing, and Ernest touched on it a little bit, and that's the fact that our educational systems that have been co-opted by the federal government are no longer teaching the things that our children need to learn. They don't understand the founding of our government. They don't understand why things were done, and we need to get back to that. And the question is how can we, I don't have any kids in the school districts anymore, but how can we, as people who understand the importance of federalism, understand the importance of the founding, understand how important it is for liberty to keep this structure intact, how can we do it? How can we fix those issues with our children and with the education that they're getting? besides teaching them at home? I mean, I did that, but what else can we do so that our children aren't coming out of the school district completely ignorant of what they need to do as adults and how we need to preserve our country?
Yeah, Becky, you're zeroing right in on some of the root issues. Henry David Thoreau said, "For the thousands of people hacking at the leaves of problems, there's one striking at the root." And education. George Washington said that the whole purpose of our education system was to teach the science of government. That nothing was more important to the preservation of our freedom than teaching that. And so, how do we get there? How do we get people to understand it? One of the things that we're doing is we've developed a curriculum on federalism that you can find at the Center for Constitutional Studies at Utah Valley University. The URL is uvu.edu/CCS, and the curriculum is taught by liberals and mostly liberals, but people on all sides of the political spectrum, because again, this is not political, it's structural. So one of the things that we're doing with the Constitutional Studies Center is developing a K-12 outreach to teach the teachers how to teach the Constitution, why it matters. This is how we preserve our governing voice. I was at a conference a year ago in Boston, the National Conference of State Legislators, and Frank Luntz, many of you may know who he is, national, international pollster. And he was the keynote speaker, and he said, the number one polling issue with respect to government and politics right now, 80% across the political spectrum, is people feel like they have lost their governing voice. There's no efficiency, no effectiveness, no accountability in government. And then he came into our federalism meetings and he said, and that's federalism. Federalism, this idea of dividing power and having the bulk of the balance of governing power most locally where your voice matters, is how we magnify our governing voice. It's how we have direct effectiveness and accountability for the effectiveness and efficiency of government. Number one issue. And so taking that down at that level and teaching that this is why we feel like we're losing our voice. This is why we feel like the system is detached from us, is because we've lost this balance in the governing system. And so we're working through the Utah Valley University Constitutional Studies Center to do that outreach. But I would also suggest, and we're looking to go nationally on that, I would also suggest that as you elect your representatives, your agents, to understand the system, you hold them accountable for knowing what their job is, knowing what these lanes are that Ernest was talking about, then they understand this is critical. Like Justice Kennedy said, the fragmentation of power, dividing, limiting, and balancing power produced by the structure of our government is central to liberty. And when we destroy that, we place liberty at peril. And so we have to teach the government the structure of our government. It's central to all of our rights. So a couple of things, right? That outreach that we're doing there, as we hire state representatives and hold them accountable for knowing the system, then we have them work on that education system as well.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question, then we'll turn the last few minutes over to you so you can kind of tell us about what's going on, what you guys are working on, Utah Way, all those other things. Gwen, you were up. What was your question?
Yes, I just had a question about sort of tactics at the state level, and wanted you to talk a little bit about the idea of state federalism commissions.
Yeah, that's a great concept, great idea. Right now, the National Conference of State Legislatures, has identified 35 states that have some form of federalism, intergovernmental state-federal relations committees. The whole idea of our nation was called a union of states. I mean, in the Constitution, it says to form a more perfect union of states. And so it's states acting as a union that are an effective counterbalance to the national government. So to really work and encourage your state representatives throughout the nation to, if they have a Federalism Commission, whatever they call it, to make sure it's active and networked. If they don't have a Federalism Commission, to create one and then network, collaborate, work as a union with other states. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is we're creating through Utah Valley University, the first of its kind. We funded it this year in our legislature. We're creating a Federalism Index. And the idea of the Federalism Index is like the tire gauge for the bicycle we were talking about. How do we know what the tire pressure is if we don't have a gauge? And so to build that federalism gauge, if you will, the Federalism Index, where are we on the balance of power? And we can do that now. The business analytics are so sophisticated. I mean, imagine what Franklin and Jefferson and Madison would have done with these business analytics, these data analytics, to measure and monitor the divisions and limits and balance if they had them. Of course, they would have used these tools. And so we're going back to build this Federalism Index. We're working with people across the nation so that we can know where are we in the balance, and is it getting better or is it getting worse? And when was it good, and when did it start to diverge from that path of a healthy balance so that we can know to do less of that? And did it ever start to get more balanced so we can know to do more of that? And so those are some really important things that we're doing. You can find out more information about that at our Utah Commission on Federalism and the uvu.edu CCS, Constitutional Studies Center. And this Federalist Coalition is doing great work. It's federalistcoalition.com. They're doing great work to rally people throughout the states to encourage their state leaders to create and activate Federalism Commission so we can start working on this structure that's so critical to our liberty.
Well, Ken, I have to say, you and I, we've spoken tersely through email here and there, but I've kind of stayed out of most of this because since I was going to be the guy kind of moderating it, I didn't really want to color things too much. I have to say, I'm really impressed. This interview or this event has gone really, really well. I have a couple of questions, though. These are actually some of the ones that got sent in to us beforehand. And well, actually, I guess my question before we get into that, with as good as this has gone, do you do any public speaking anywhere? And if possible, if anybody wants to reach out to you to speak to their group or organization regarding federalism, is there any way that they could do that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I speak frequently. I've taught on these principles all over the nation, and I'm passionate about this. I believe that if we don't fix the structure, then, like Justice Kennedy said, we place liberty at peril. So, I speak frequently. I speak to groups large and small. You can contact me. Website is 3 greatrights.com, 3greatrights.com. And I can teach, we do keynote presentations, we do seminars, workshops, a whole variety of things. This is absolutely critical. There again, rights we don't know are no better than rights we don't have, and rights we don't exercise are no better than rights we don't have.
I couldn't agree more. All right, so as promised, the last few minutes are yours. Tell us anything else you feel like we need to know about you, federalism, anything else that's going on. We'll keep going until you run out of steam.
Well, I appreciate that, Rick. Imagine you had a child and you said, God, if you were just a couple feet taller, everything would be great. And just hurry up and grow. Just grow a couple feet taller. And if you don't grow taller right now, I'm going to whip you. Of course, not politically correct, and you wouldn't. But this idea of you can't force people to grow. The leaders, the representatives that we choose are constitutionally as tall as they are. We can't whip them. We can't browbeat them to be constitutionally taller. We can teach and we can help them to grow. And if they're not willing to grow, then we get new representatives and new agents. I'll just tell you quickly my experience. So I got elected to office, and as I was about to be elected, I realized that my family, we were reading the Constitution at that time as part of our family study, because that's just how we are. And Article 6 of the Constitution says the members of the state legislatures shall be bound by oath or affirmation to uphold the United States Constitution. And so for the first time, I'm going to raise my hand to the square. I'm going to swear that oath to uphold and defend the United States Constitution. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. What did the founders intend for me to do? And what power did they allocate to me to protect to uphold the United States Constitution. It just floored me, that responsibility. And so after being elected for the first time, I actually took my little trailer up in the mountains and I holed away for about 3 weeks and wrote a little outline to myself of what I believed they intended for me to do. And I shared it with a constitutional law professor, Rob Nadelson, wonderful constitutional scholar. And I still remember the voicemail. He says, "Yeah, this is pretty good. Let's publish this. I'd like to write a foreword to that, and let's get it out to everyone." And it became a little book called "Where's the Line? How States Protect the Constitution." I think it's available on Amazon, and it's on that Three Great Rights website. But how states protect the Constitution, and then Rick, after being elected and writing that, I went into state legislator training. So new state legislator training, and I asked legislators around the nation, and effectively this is the same training that your state legislators get across the nation. You come into a room and you're given your parking pass, you're given your building pass and the key to your office, you're told where the bathrooms are, you're shown how the microphones work, you fill out your insurance information, and you're told that, hey, be careful, the microphones are always hot, and then you're admonished that the lobbyists are no longer your friends when you're no longer in office, and that's state legislator training.
Yeah,
there is nothing about the system. There's nothing about the structure. There's nothing that equips state leaders from being elected to know the structure and know the system that they swear an oath to defend. And again, that falls back on us. If we want to be treated like the boss, and if we want our agents to secure and protect our rights, we have to take responsibility for that. So one of the things we're doing with the Utah Valley University is we're working to develop state legislator training on this structure that, working with the National Conference of State Legislatures, we hope to disseminate that throughout the United States so that our legislators know what they're responsible for, where these lanes are that Ernest was talking about, and what their powers are to maintain them. And then it's our job to hold them accountable for that. So critical work, the uvu.edu, CCS, the Constitutional Studies Center. Again, this Federalist Coalition is working on that. You can reach me at the number 3greatrights.com. I've also got my campaign website and all that. Happy to have you have a look at that. That's just voteivory.com. But it's critical. This is absolutely critical. If we don't stop to think about this structure, this machine. I'll tell you one last story as we end. I was going down to UVU. I was teaching a class on American government, and I got there a little bit early. And so I thought, well, I'll go get a snack. There's a candy machine right next to the classroom. And I thought, and so I go up and I stand. There's somebody in front of me, and I'm waiting in line for my turn. And he puts his money in, and the little dial on the item that he selected only turned about a quarter of a turn, and his item didn't drop. And of course, you know exactly what he did next, right? I mean, he starts beating the machine and kicking the machine and rocking the machine and trying to stick his arm up the slot to get his item. And I'm standing right behind him, and I'm thinking, you don't give a rip. You could care less what kind of condition that machine is in when it's my turn. You just want what you want. You want your candy bar right now, and to heck with the machine. And as I went in to teach the class, I said, I scrapped the material that I had for the class I was teaching, and I taught about the candy machine. That's what we're doing right now in our country. We just want the candy bar, and we don't care what shape the machine is in for the people behind us. Well, I have 4 children. I have a brand new grandbaby now who's just an angel, and I care about what shape the machine is in to produce life, liberty, and property so that they can pursue happiness. And it's our responsibility to properly maintain that machine and not just beat it to heck to get the candy bar that we want now. And that's what federalism is really about. It's about maintaining that machine, that balance and that structure so that we can produce those life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness candy bars indefinitely and not just take what we want now and the next generation be darned because we want what we want. And it's our responsibility. The founders put this responsibility on us as Americans. It's our responsibility as the sovereigns in this system to uphold and defend and maintain these I believe divinely inspired rights in this system. So, Rick, I sure appreciate you having me on. Happy to respond to any last things, but great to be with you and happy to come back again.
It has been my absolute honor, sir. Actually, I just want to let you know, KLRNradio.com, which is actually the corporation that I'm a member of, and we do streaming, internet radio, things like that. We are at your disposal. So if you have any materials you need promoted, things like that, just you have my email, so just let me know. Federalism is a very important thing for me. It has been for a long time, because the one thing that I figured out a long time ago is if we're going to fix the system, we actually have to fix the system. And I have to say, I've interviewed lots of people in the 10 years that I've been doing radio. You are by far probably one of my favorite interviews. Just because.
Well, that's very kind of you. That's very kind. Go on LinkedIn and give me a recommendation and tell people what you think. And maybe if this is up, we'll post it on there. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all the rest. And yeah, we have to keep this conversation going, and we have to take responsibility for what we do with this system. But you're very kind. And it's been a great honor to be on with you and to get this message out.
All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this very special presentation, again, sponsored by the Federalist Coalition as well as KLRN Radio. Ken Ivory has been my guest. He is right. There will be a link to a podcast appearing here in probably about 5 minutes or so. We'll be dispersing that to the groups that help get things together, because I know they have things they want to do with it. I will make sure you get a link to it as well, sir, and I will actually be finding you on LinkedIn and Twitter and a few other places. I want to thank everybody again for taking the time to tune in. Thanks to the Federalist Coalition for making this possible. Again, this is probably one of the first nights in a long time that I've actually enjoyed doing radio again. You guys know some of the backstory, so I'm not going to bore you with that, but for everybody who's just tuning in, if you've missed it, the show will be set to podcast here in about 5 minutes or so. You've been listening to What is Federalism, sponsored by the Federalist Coalition, a special presentation on KLRNradio.com.
Little tore up, still hurting from the fight. And then it hit me. You ain't gotta pick a side. You can love your fellow man and still have pride. 'Cause we're all stitched together like the red, white, and blue. Might be a little bit different, but we're all the same too. 'Cause the stars and stripes are so much more than that old piece of cloth on your grandma's porch. It gave us that American dream to be anything that we want to be. It don't matter where you are, from a one-room church to an uptown bar. Don't care if you're